My name is Jared Anderson, and I am a chaplain with Envision Hospice, and this in-service is called Caring for the Caregivers. I first had the idea for this in-service as I would visit patients at different facilities, and as I provided this care for the patients, I noticed how the staff would also talk about the struggles that they were having. And I thought to myself, wow, these staff really need their own chaplain. Every facility needs its own chaplain. And then I realized, wait, I'm your chaplain. And so I put together this in-service that provides some perspective and recommendations about how you can care for yourself. First, I want to say that you in the caregiving industry have some of the most meaningful and impactful jobs in existence. It is such a sacred opportunity to engage with people in such vulnerable moments. I am so grateful that I found chaplaincy. I taught religion for 13 years before I started ministering as a chaplain. And I playfully call myself a professional, decent human being. And in ministry, I am able to show up where life breaks open. And similarly, caregivers also show up where life breaks open in these most human and vulnerable of contexts. So in this presentation, I'm going to go through caring steps: checking in, naming, feeling, grieving, being, meaning, caring, and sustaining. Again, that's checking in, naming, feeling, grieving, being, meaning, caring, and sustaining. Let's take a moment to check in. What a simple question it is. How are you? We hear it all the time, right? One thing that I want to emphasize in this presentation, however, is all of the paradoxes around human behavior. And the paradox relating to this question, how are you? Hey, how are you? Is that most people don't actually want to know. Isn't that kind of messed up? When someone says, how are you? They actually don't want to know. Their words, how are you, is part of this ritual, and we all know the ritual answer. The ritual answer is, fine, thanks. You? And this is actually kind of tragic, because how are you is a check-in about life. And social convention has turned this check-in, this question about your well-being, into a formulaic, automatic non-engagement. It has the appearance of engagement without any of the power or benefit of that engagement. So again, I ask, how are you? How are you really? How are you doing? I will sometimes say I'm surviving, or one answer that I really enjoy is I couldn't be better. And then I comment on the fact that no matter how you're doing, you couldn't be better. You couldn't be better in this very moment. And so I try to take this ritual, automatic, dismissed opportunity of how are you to say, no, really, how are you? Tell me how you're doing today. And so it needs to be shaken up a little bit. What are the low points in your life right now? What are you struggling with? What are your high points? What are you happy about? What are you excited about right now? How are you right now in this very moment? How are you right now? And that brings us to the power of naming. But first, I want to take a step back and name how difficult this moment in history is. Let's talk about COVID. Let's talk about the coronavirus and how much more challenging COVID has made the already challenging task of life and of caregiving. I have been calling COVID World War III since the beginning, and I felt vindicated when a military publication also called it World War III. This is a global pandemic and a world war. Every country is engaging with this. Australia and New Zealand are doing amazingly, as are many countries. COVID has been such an invitation, and it has shown us the truth around so many aspects of our culture, our institutions, and our own life and our own habits. This is best case World War III. I don't want to minimize in any way the tragedy of the losses, of sickness, of complications, of after effects, and of the hundreds of thousands of deaths that we have had from COVID-19 globally. But why this is best case World War III is because the pandemic, in many instances, is bringing us together. And we as nations are cooperating. We are building masks for each other. We have been working together on the vaccine. I feel very grateful to have been able to be vaccinated. And I know that many of you in the healthcare industry are as well. And this vaccine represents so much that is good and amazing about human nature with international cooperation. That said, the scale and sickness of death is not something that we are designed to be able to manage. It is very, very difficult. I don't need to tell you that. What are some complications? Not only is this global pandemic overwhelming and tragic, and there are very real personal, relational, institutional costs, but one of the most difficult things about COVID-19 is the fact that it decreases our ability to manage the very tragedy that it is. So, for example, we are isolated and disconnected. COVID has separated us and brought us together in very poignant, complicated ways. Many of us are more isolated and alone than we have ever been. We aren't able to visit our family as easily. We aren't able to spend time with each other as easily. I have seen many patients die without their families being able to visit them. And this is very difficult. Not only is it overwhelming, but the nature of the virus complicates and compromises our grieving process. Because we grieve in groups. What do you do at a funeral? You give people a hug. You say, I'm so sorry. You eat together. Mourning and grieving is a collective process. And it is very difficult that we are not able to engage in that collective process as easily. Keep COVID and these complications in mind as we move forward with this in-service. Where I want to start is naming, the power of naming. If any of you like fantasy or stories in general, a very important part of the quest, of the myth, of the legend is this power of naming. You know, like, what is your name? Who are you? What do you stand for? What is your role? These are still very powerful questions. And if you can be honest around what is going on, what you are feeling, what the situation is, you are better able to engage with it. So for example, what you can name, you rule. What you will name, you have power over. But what you can't name or what you won't name has power over you. And this is why it's so helpful to have people in our lives who can show us our blind spots. Because we all avoid reality. It's really difficult and really overwhelming. One thing I'm very grateful for is that for a variety of reasons, I have been able to courageously name the truth about myself, about situations. And people sometimes think that I'm pessimistic, but I'm not. I call my approach redeemed realism. And it's very much like assessment and triage in the medical field. So for example, if someone comes into the emergency room, you saying anything other than the absolute clean, clear truth is a waste of time, and it even does damage. If someone is actively dying, if someone's lung is punctured, if someone has an amputated arm, if someone was just in a motorcycle crash, no matter what the truth is, the only responsible way to deal with it is to be completely and clearly honest about what's going on. And so it is with emotions. And so it is with the human experience in general, is that we need to be honest and courageous about what we are really feeling. Now, spoiler alert, the truth is often far more simple than we make it. The truth about ourself and our emotions is often very simple things like, I'm scared, and I'm sad, or I'm angry. We'll talk about emotions in just a moment. For now, I want to invite all of you to check in and increase your ability to be fully honest with yourself. I won't go too much into this, but my second divorce is what fundamentally transformed me. And at the end of my second marriage, I said to my ex-wife, the reality of you as a whole person threatens me. And that has to do with malconditioning and all sorts of things that we don't need to get into. But naming the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's scary, has made all the difference in my life. So naming, I feel overwhelmed, I can't do this, I hate this, this is impossible, I want to give up. Now, the problem with these statements, even though they are true, is they are too powerful. Words are spells. Our words reflect and express what we want to be true, and our actions reflect what is true. That's why, as Maya Angelou said, when someone shows you what they are, believe them. The problem about this naming is it is catastrophized. It is absolutized. And one amazing thing that we'll come back to is that when we speak, our bodies listen. And the way that we talk to ourselves and others literally changes our lives. It changes our bodies. The way that we talk to ourselves and others is literally a matter of life and death. So these statements, I feel overwhelmed, I can't do this, I hate this, this is impossible, I want to give up, they're true, but they are too big. They're too grand. Our body says, okay, it's like that saying, whether you think you can or can't, you are right. So let's practice naming specifically. Naming specifically has made all the difference in my own life because I have very, very big feelings. My father was, and older brother is bipolar. And so I have inherited really big feelings. I am very sensitive. I also have a photographic memory. Like, again, my feelings are very big. And it has made all the difference for me to name very specifically. So for example, let's look back at those other statements. I feel overwhelmed right now. In this moment, I don't see how I can do this. In this moment, I am feeling resistant to this. Right now, this feels impossible for this version of me. We'll come back to this, but I love this idea of versions of self. Don't speak for your future self. You don't know what your future self will be able to do. Right now, I am feeling like I want to give up. I am telling myself the story that something else would be better. That's a really great tool. Remember that. I am telling myself the story that. Try this in your relationships. It makes all the difference, whether between saying, well, you don't care about me. That's a fight. Whereas if you say, right now I'm telling myself the story that you don't care about me, and I'm scared that you might not care about me. This is part of emotionally focused therapy, and this opens up that communication to this vulnerable, honest space rather than the accusation, you don't care about me. Do you see the difference? So be as specific as you can, and as much as you can, talk about the current moment. And even feelings about the future are really feelings in the current moment about the future. So you could say, I'm afraid or I'm worried that I might lose my job. So that's a moment, and you are staying in the present moment. I am having feelings right now about these concerns that I have. The power of stories. One of the most powerful summaries I've ever heard, and I love summaries, is that if you are not happy, it is because you are gaining a reward more important to you than happiness. I was having a conversation with my 10-year-old the other day. She was throwing a temper tantrum, and we very gently said, do you want to talk about it? Is there anything we can do? But nope, she just wanted a temper tantrum on the couch. And the next morning, I gently checked in and I said, isn't it kind of funny that we want to stay in a bad mood? Another example that I really like is any of us who ever answer a phone realize that we are more in control of our feelings than we want to admit. If we're like, oh, I'm so angry and I'm so upset and I'm so sad. Hello, yes, this is Jared. We know that we can change our feelings like that. And I'm not in any way minimizing the intensity of emotion and especially mental illness, and also the power of context. Our feelings are pretty overwhelmingly impacted by our context. But that said, as we'll come back to, we have more power than we can imagine around the way that we feel and around the way that we respond. One thing that I have learned is that many people's top priority, and this is so tragic, is to avoid life, is to avoid showing up to life. And it may seem absurd, but think about it, and I think that you will acknowledge it's true. What many of us value is not being in charge of our own lives. We want someone else to tell us what to do. We want our problems to be someone else's fault. It is really scary to acknowledge, yep, this is up to me. It is up to me to manage this. I love the Will Smith summary, not my fault, my responsibility. Whether or not things are our fault, it is our responsibility to engage and take care of them. So the thing that I've learned, as I said, my working hypothesis is that our top priority is the story we tell about ourselves. And very often this story we tell about ourselves is a story that deflects and projects responsibility off of us. And that is not great. And so we are what we tell. Like what we say becomes reality. Even more importantly, we are what we train. As I said, I went from university to ministry, and I have been struck by the power of practice, by the power of training. And everything that we do and everything that we say is training us. So one thing that helps me is to think about difficult experiences as emotional workouts. Like gym culture and like, ooh, I'm gonna, all the things about getting gains and working out and so forth. Our culture really values physical health and working out, but interestingly, our culture doesn't teach us much about how to manage our emotions in a healthy way. And so another favorite nugget, remember this. So emotions and feelings are often used as synonyms, but in a very real way, our emotions are stories we tell ourselves about our feelings that are in our body. Our feelings are in our body and our emotions are in our mind. You would never say, like, if I poked you in the knee, I wouldn't say, what emotion are you feeling in your knee? No, it's what emotion are you having? What emotion are you experiencing in your knee? Now, emotions are carried in our body, and that's an interesting topic. But you would say, like, what are you feeling? What does this feel like? What are you feeling in your knee? So our feelings are in our bodies, and our emotions are in our minds. Our emotions are the stories we tell ourselves about our feelings. And one thing that has helped me tremendously is to keep my feelings clean. It's very much like a clean wound versus an infected wound. What is the difference between pain and suffering? I think suffering is not inevitable. Pain more or less is, given the nature of our bodies. I think that suffering is pain plus resistance plus story. So suffering happens when we resist the pain, when we tell stories about the pain, when we say that we shouldn't be feeling the pain. And what helps me is to just cleanly name what is going on in my body. So I will say, wow, I am feeling a lot of anxiety in my body. Just this morning, I got news that I did not get a very promising job opportunity that would have changed my life, and I've been working at it for 10 months. And already my brain knows that it's probably for the best, but my body feels a lot of grief. And I'm not resisting it. I'm just letting myself be sad. This is the power of matter-of-fact acceptance. This is incredibly powerful. Curious, compassionate acceptance is always the answer. Even if you feel angry, and this is the Buddhist idea of non-attachment, even if you're angry, even if something needs to change, begin with curious, compassionate acceptance. Be curious. What is going on here? What caused this? What are these feelings telling me? What can I learn from what I'm feeling? And then name what you're feeling very cleanly, where you're like, wow, I wonder why I'm so sad. I'm really curious why I'm so sad. And it's okay. It's okay not to be okay. That is one of the most important things. And knowing in your body, that's another framing that has really helped me, this idea of knowing something in your body. So this body knowing, the most important body knowing that you can have is probably, I can get through this. Even though I'm in pain, even though I'm sad, I'll be okay. I am okay. Like, even though I'm sad, I am okay. So again, compassionate, curious acceptance is incredibly powerful. Now let's talk about feelings. Inside Out, I hope that you've all seen it. It is a fantastic movie. As I said, let yourself feel and name whatever you are feeling. So Inside Out talked about sadness, joy, fear, disgust, and anger. And anyone who has seen it knows that the main message of the movie is that we need to accept and relationship with all of our feelings, not just the ones that we think of as pleasant. Unfortunately, our society makes this more difficult because our society tells us that we are only allowed 2 emotions each, depending on our gender. So if we are men, what are we allowed? I, as a man, we're all allowed to be happy, right? Like we're allowed to be happy and pleasant and agreeable and easy. Men can also be angry. So men are allowed to be happy and angry. Women are allowed to be happy and sad. If a man is sad, he is often made fun of. And if a woman is angry, she's often attacked. And then none of us, it is not socially acceptable to be afraid or to be ashamed. You don't need to act on your feelings, but you do need to name them. My own preference and ethic is thoughts and feelings are safe, and I work to be accountable for my behavior. And I told you we would be talking about paradoxes. One of the paradoxes that we're talking about is that as I am compassionate, curious acceptance around my thoughts, compassionate, curious acceptance around my feelings, I increase my ability to behave well. Here's the secret. We all experience a wide variety of feelings. All of these feelings are messengers. All of these feelings have things to say. Feelings are messengers. And what are they messengers of? Feelings, this may seem surprising, but feelings are actually messengers of love. At the root of all of our feelings is this deep message of self-love. This idea that I deserve to be treated well. So let's go through all of it. We are happy when we are treated well. We are angry that we are not treated well. We are hurt or sad. Often anger is covering up or masking hurt and sadness. We are hurt and sad that we're not treated well. We are afraid that we are going to not be treated well. Or we are afraid that we're in a situation where we won't be treated well. And we feel ashamed, or we feel guilt, or we feel a sense of responsibility that we didn't treat ourselves well, or that we didn't treat others well, which means we didn't live according to our values. And so that's called moral injury. And so that's another example of us not treating ourselves well. And so at the root of all of this is love, is this deep internalized intuition that we deserve to be treated well. Isn't that great? So let's get into grieving now. Grieving is a form of love. And taking time to grieve is incredibly important. The way that you heal in your feelings is you feel them. You feel them all the way. You feel them as big as they need to be. That is the key, is to feel them. And in a word, the task of grief is acceptance, but it can't be rushed. There's something called toxic positivity where you're like, oh, it's for the best. You're fine. There's nothing wrong. That's toxic. And it is a betrayal to our very natures. Remember what I said about feelings. We need to be safe to feel as big as we need to. Grief is like a badly behaved pet, and we are in a relationship with grief. And the truth about grief is that we'll never exactly get over it. We become, instead, new versions of ourselves. Remember, I talked about versions of ourselves. We become versions of ourselves who are okay enough, who have become able to live and move forward even with that grief. We have become strong enough to bear that grief, and we are better for it. Another framing that I appreciate is this idea of spending pain, spending the pain of currency and consciousness. So, and also consequence, instead, what do we do with these feelings? Instead of getting lost in why me and why is this happening, which is okay, but as we process through grief, as we metabolize and assimilate that grief, we can say, okay, what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with this grief? People are often surprised at, or they wonder how I am able to be a chaplain, how I am able to serve the dying, the imprisoned, the traumatized, how I'm able to show up in these tragedies. And one thing that helps me is the reminder that whether or not I'm looking at something, it's already happening. It's already real. And are you ready for the dark secret? The dark secret is that I kind of hurt all the time. I playfully call myself a professional sad person. Now, I'm like sad and happy and wonderstruck all at the same time. My brain is very loud that way, and it just works that way. So being alive is painful for me. Remember, I said telling the truth is a really important place to start. But the beautiful thing is that I have never found anything more healing than to be able to spend the currency of that pain. Like being alive is painful for me. And so when I am able to help others who are in painful moments, that helps me. That gives meaning and helps me feel like things are worth it. Naming, who do you most grieve right now? What do you most grieve right now? We grieve what was and no longer will be. That's basic grief. You know, someone dies, you're not going to be with them again. We grieve what was and should not have been. That's trauma. Bad things that happen that we wish didn't happen. And we grieve what could have been, but wasn't. I never really knew my father, for example. And so he died at 49, and people are often sympathetic to the fact that he died at 49. But the deeper truth is that I grieve that I never really knew him. Not so much grieving that he finally died at 49. Feeling. How do you feel when you think about this grief? How do you feel when you think about this person that you grieve? Here are the tasks of grieving. Accept the reality of the loss. Process the pain of the grief. Adjust to the new reality. Update, accept, and update the relationship and move forward with your new life that is different because of that loss, because of that tragedy, because of that trauma. Okay, now I want to get into some recommendations and skills about how to cope with being human. I call myself a devout agnostic. And what I mean by that is that we as humans are profoundly limited, and basically we aren't ever right about anything. We are always wrong. Our brains only take in enough information to survive. We literally live in a hallucination, not live in a simulation. That's something different. But we experience a hallucination because our senses only take in enough information to keep us alive, and then our brains interpret it, and again, only take in enough information to keep us alive. The upside of this is that you are a mystery. You are forever a mystery. And so I love this idea of everyone that I meet being a mystery. Oh, teach me about you. Teach me what your experience is like. Teach me what your life is like. And I get to do this as a chaplain. Another difficult thing about being human is we kind of live life in reverse. We are terrible judges of what's good for us. And we're even terrible judges of what we want, because we want all sorts of contradictory things. We want things in irresponsible ways. When my friends say, well, what do you want, Jared? I say, well, that's not a very useful question. And they're like, fine, what do you think is the right thing? Or what do you think will facilitate the best version of us? Yeah, I'm totally a nerd like that. So we only know what we are glad to have done and regret to have done. And the craziest thing is sometimes, in a way, we never really have a clear sense. And so this is why compassionate, curious acceptance is so powerful, is because these judgments about whether something is good or bad, we just don't know. We don't have enough information. And so that's why compassionate, curious acceptance is so powerful as a starting point. And then we can say, okay, this is the way things are. What do I do next? What's the next right step? So we are incredibly limited as human beings. We're also very selfish as human beings, and that's genuinely and generally true. But what I mean specifically about that is we are selfish because we only have access to our own perceptions. There's no way to actually know what someone else is feeling and what someone else is experiencing. And that is why our social nature is so important. But before we move on from being selfish, which is really hard and we can't do it, I want to talk about the empathy backfire effect. So the empathy backfire effect is what I call this terrible tendency to throw someone else's pain under the bus to make ourselves feel better. I literally own this book called Against Empathy. And the basic idea is that empathy, even though it's a nice starting point, is not sufficient to treat ourselves and others well. Here's why. Empathy, all mammals have empathy as best as we can tell. It's very developed in primates. And empathy, what is empathy? You know what empathy is. Empathy is where you feel what someone else is feeling. And this is an actual biological, physiological reality. Because of mirror neurons and the way that we read signals, we are actually feeling what someone else is feeling. And our emotional state piggybacks on our physical nervous systems, and then our social feelings piggyback on top of that. And that is why when you feel a broken heart, it genuinely hurts. Like, we genuinely feel our emotions in our bodies. It is causing very real pain. Now, we have more power over our emotional pain than we are aware, and I'll get to that in just a moment. So the empathy backfire effect happens when someone comes to you with something difficult, and it backfires because as soon as you feel what they are feeling, it becomes your pain. And then what's your priority? Your priority is your own pain. And the most efficient way, not the best way, but the most efficient way to manage someone else's pain, well, to manage your own pain, is to minimize and discount someone else's pain. And that is why people say terrible things in the face of death, like, well, at least you can have other children. Brene Brown calls this silver lining something. Or at least you were able to get pregnant, or at least you knew your father, or at least, it's not that bad, or you're better off without them, or maybe you'll find a better job. The real reason why we behave this way is because we are uncomfortable sitting with the reality of their pain. And as a chaplain, as a minister, I am literally trained in this. Like, this is my training. My training as a minister, and since chaplains are professional, decent human beings, all of us need to do it. My training as a minister is in emotional fortitude. And what that means is that I can stay calm and open and compassionate and loving pretty much no matter what happens. Pretty much no matter what happens, I can stay open, gentle, grounded, compassionate. This is called a ministry of presence. And this is why some people feel really, really good to be around, is because they have done their own work and they are not making your existence harder. They are actually making it easier, and you feel safe with them. So here is the script when someone else is suffering. That's a lot. Tell me what that's like for you. I'm here. You're not even saying it's bad or good. You're not even saying you're sorry. You're just saying, like, wow, that's a lot. What is that like? That's a lot that your best friend just died. What's going on with you? What is that like for you? I'm here. And then you'll be able to find out how to support them effectively, which is its own thing. Now, our social nature, well, again, that's a lot. What is this like for you? I'm here. And only say I'm here to the degree that you can actually follow through on. You could say like, I want to be here for you, or I want to be here for you as much as I can, or let's work together to find other resources. Again, tell the truth. Be in proper relationship with reality. Now, our social natures are our redemption. We are incredibly social beings. And I think the greatest path to truth is in an intimate relationship. It's an interesting question of, do you know yourself the best? Maybe not, because on one hand, only we know what we are experiencing. On the other hand, is we're avoidant and we all have blind spots. And so in a safe, intimate relationship, that is the most productive space to actually find out the truth about yourself. But it needs to be a safe relationship. Okay, let's get into some practices that will help you in your day-to-day work and life. Spirituality. I do spiritual assessments, and I know we use the term spiritual and religion in a particular way, but at its core, spirituality is about meaning and connection. What are your sources of meaning? What are you plugged into? What are you connected to? And even in an individual way, we are like plugged into the universe. You know, like how are you plugged into the universe? And then what is the meaning of life? What is your meaning? What are your values? And being clear on what your meaning is and what your values are enables you to be a freaking superhero and get through pretty much anything. As Viktor Frankl said, the one who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. The one who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. So the way that we name things and the meaning we give to things is incredibly powerful. So what is your job? I like giving this to CNAs because is the CNA's job a butt wiper? Is the CNA's job a babysitter for old people? Or is a CNA's job to companion human beings in their most vulnerable moments and preserve their dignity? That's incredible. Like, that is an amazing thing. The way that you describe your job, the meaning you give to your life, literally changes your body. It changes your health. One of my favorite stories about this is a study that was done with hotel housekeepers. Hotel housekeeping is not the most glamoring job. It's literally changing sheets and cleaning toilets. They separated these housekeepers, hospitality staff, I think they're called now, into two groups. One group, they said, did you realize that your job counts as an exercise program? Think about the motions that you go through as you make the bed, clear the sheets, clean the toilet, clean the shower. That's an exercise program. You are already doing an exercise program. The others were told nothing. Only the half that were told they were doing exercise while working lost weight and got healthier. Isn't that wild? The way that you think about your job, the way you think about your life, literally impacts and even determines almost how healthy your engagement is. So remind your mind what you are doing and why you are doing it. So for example, my highest value is integrity, and I value alignment. I value elegant efficiency. I love it when things are beautiful. I love it when things work. And this is why I'm producing this video, because producing this video is an incredibly efficient way to provide for this care. One of my favorite things to tell staff in care facilities is you are cultivating emotional endurance. You are cultivating emotional endurance. You are training your body and your mind and your soul with the knowledge and the strength that you can bear pretty much anything. I checked in on a patient and the CNA said, yeah, he was naked, screaming, covered in urine all night. And I took a moment and I said, do you realize how amazing that is? That you can be chill and grounded and matter of fact about that? That is incredible. And I love how in the medical field in general and end-of-life care specifically, you can engage with the whole spectrum of human experience in a respectful, gracious, caring, dignified ways. That is incredible. I also work at a hospital, and in a single day I helped two young parents, two sets of young parents who I helped them make arrangements to bury their children, bury their babies. And there is not much more wrong feeling than death where you expect life. And once I had established a relationship with these parents, timing is very, very important. Relationship is very important. Order is very important. I said gently, wow, I am so sorry that you're going through this. And I can't even imagine how hard it is. One of the things your baby is teaching you is that you can go through almost anything. You are going through one of the hardest experiences as a human being, and you are doing it. And they were both handling it impressively well. And it's allowed to get as bad as it needs to be and last as long as it needs to be. But knowing that you can get through hard things, it's that spiritual workout or that emotional workout that is incredible. And I think that being able to lean into pain and remaining open to pain, being that emotional superhero, is perhaps the single most important thing you can possibly do. Possibly cultivate, because once you know that you can withstand that difficult emotional experience, once you know in your body, you're not just telling yourself, I think I can do this, but you know in your body, yeah, I made it through. I made it through those hard months. I made it through those hard days. We will make it through COVID. Once you know in your body, you gain mastery and you're like, yeah, I got this. I know that I can do this. Let's talk about why things happen for a moment. Obviously, everything has a reason. Everything happens for a reason, not in some cosmic God made it happen way necessarily. That's a different problem that we're not going to talk about. But everything has a cause. We can track the path of the coronavirus, for example. And one reason why the United States is having such a hard time with the coronavirus is because we are very individualistic. A lot of people in the United States believe in conspiracy theories. They're very skeptical around the vaccine. There are movements that are anti-science, anti-vaccination, skeptical of all this, skeptical of masks. And there are valid discussions to be had around all of that. But I'm talking about the general culture of denial and hyper-individualism. A couple memes that I saw recently, one said, well, clearly we need to retire the term avoid it like the plague because we don't. And then the other one was very sobering, where I think it really is a condemnation of the United States that we have done such a bad job masking and social distancing. Asian countries where social distancing and masking and collective responsibility are more emphasized and more valued are doing much, much better. There was another funny meme that I saw where it's like, you know why all the apocalypse movies are set in the United States? It's because the rest of the world is fine. And the rest of the world is like, do you think we should tell them that the rest of the world is totally fine and they're the only ones where the world is burning and ending? And they're like, nah, we'll let them deal with it. And I don't mean to be overly negative, but again, truth-telling and naming, I do genuinely think that in the United States, we have a hyper-individualism problem. We have a the anti-vaxxing, the people who are just thoughtlessly anti-vaccination. That's a problem. We are skeptical of, as I said, science and the medical field in general. The COVID vaccine is amazing. So here's an example of an absurd conspiracy theory. Is something like, well, Bill Gates is benefiting from the vaccine. He donated an unbelievable amount of money to make it happen. Or the vaccine has microchips in it. The vaccine doesn't have microchips in it. Your smartphone has microchips in it. We can already track you. Anyone who wants to track you can. It's these ridiculous stories. One of my favorite summaries is everything happens for a reason. Sometimes that reason is you're stupid and make bad decisions. And that's playful, but also serious, like owning our decisions that could be better and saying, wow, yeah, I could have handled that better. And this is how I'm going to learn from it. This is how I'm going to move forward without avoiding it or telling ourselves the story that we weren't at fault is incredibly healing and powerful. It's a little bit like the Four Seasons total landscaping story. Look it up if you haven't heard about it. It is hilarious. Okay, to conclude, let's dig into some self-care exercises. We're going to talk about care in the moment, care in the day, and sustainable well-being. This will help you no matter how your life is going, no matter how hard your job is, no matter how overwhelmed you feel. These practices will make it better. Not necessarily all better, but better than it is right now. These are practices and skills you can implement right away, here and now, and they will make your life better. I really love the idea of optimization and giving people the best chance to be their better selves and practices of wellness. So my obsession, as you can probably tell by now, after spending almost an hour with me, is well-being. I am obsessed with well-being. A lot of those books behind me are about well-being. I need to sort some that are on the floor. I'm covering them at the moment. So well-being is where it's at. And well-being is not just happiness, not positive emotions, but well-being is that feeling of contentment and rightness and meaning and connectedness and alignment. So care in the moment, care in the day, sustainable well-being. So how can we take care of ourselves in the moment? Someone suggested this is like filling your bucket on the move. Even when you don't have time to pause, do take time to eat. Even when you don't have much time to pause, you can fill your bucket on the move. Here are a few examples. One is breathing. We all breathe all the time or we're dead. So I have used breath work to manage my anxiety, sadness, strong feelings. So multiple times a day. I take in a very deep breath, I hold it, and I let it out slowly. That's like turning yourself off and on again. It's amazing. One thing I'm very proud of is I used to snap at my kids, like, oh, like what, that irresponsible yelling, making noises or whatever. And now the most I do usually, with a few exceptions, is I just go, and then maybe sometimes give myself a timeout. And my kids are like, what's wrong, Dad? And it's so sweet. Like their emotional intelligence has increased so much because they're like, what's wrong, Dad? Are you stressed or anxious or sad? It's incredible. It really is amazing. So breathing is powerful. Like there's a lot of meditation focused on your breath. And the next skill we're going to talk about is presence. Be where you are. So take mindful moments. For example, we all wash our hands a lot. So take a moment to actually feel, and this is relating to be in your body. So don't think about the next thing you need to do. Just be in the moment. So think as you wash your hands, think about what is the temperature of the water? Is it cold? Is it hot? How does it feel? How do our hands feel as we wash our hands? What is the texture of the soap as we wash our hands? There's a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise that is done with mental health, where it's like, what are 5 things that you see, 4 things that you hear, 3 things that you touch, 2 things that you smell, 1 thing that you taste. So that is a way of getting back in your body. This has helped me tremendously this past year as I have dealt with the challenge of COVID. When the lockdown first happened, I went 6 weeks without touching anyone. It was so difficult. I wish that I had a cat or just a pet. You know, I so craved touch. I was so lonely. And some practices that I have developed this year is I take care of my body much better. I go outside, I feel the sun, I take baths, I got a weighted blanket, I have really good smelling candles. So I eat well, I take care of my body in every way that I can, and it really, really helps your emotions. Don't go to bed angry. That's dumb. Go to bed. You'll probably feel better when you wake. My preferred method around going to bed angry is name what needs to be named, disengage, do your own work, let things settle, and then re-engage. So that's an interpersonal resolution model. The other thing is wonder. Experience and express gratitude and wonder. And this is probably one of my greatest gifts, is that I feel like an 8 out of 10 sadness, 8 out of 10 joy all the time. I'm really intense. I have a really high bandwidth, so I feel everything all at once. And I feel like 11 out of 10 wonder. I am constantly marveling at the way the sun feels on my skin, the texture of this desk that I feel, the opportunity to know another person, insights about myself. I am just wonderstruck, gobsmacked all the time. It makes me very intense, but it helps me so much. The last thing I'm going to talk about is what's called cognitive behavioral therapy. And cognitive behavioral therapy is where you process through the stories that your mind is telling yourself. So don't believe everything you think. So notice your thought and say, I am right. I am currently having a thought that I am miserable at work. Okay. And this is where the story I'm telling myself can be very powerful. You can say, so the story I'm telling myself is that I'm miserable at work. Is that true? Are there other ways of thinking about it? And you can say, yeah, it's a hard day. So you reframe the story. You say, I'm having a challenging day. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. This is an opportunity for me to work hard, show my value, and show that I can work hard even when things are difficult. And so you retell the story. And very often, shifting stories of being a victim, like, oh, like my boss is so unfair and this is so stupid and I hate my job and I hate the institution and no one does anything right. That's like absolutizing, catastrophizing. Instead, you can say, this is a very challenging situation. This is how I'm going to show up to it. So shifting from victimhood to empowerment. So do as much good as you can. Do as much good as the system allows. Think outside the box, work within the box, change the box as possible. These are things that I would tell volunteers who worked at the prison. So job number 1 is hospice. Job number 2 is the prison. Job number 3 is nonprofit work. Job number 4 is the hospital. And so again, shift your story. Where is your power? Where is your choice? And remember, you have a lot more power than you think. Or maybe you have exactly the amount of power that you think. Like that saying, whether you think you can or can't, you are right. And so by you telling yourself, you can do this, you can do this, you've got this, you can make it, those little pep talks, they actually work. Care in the day. I love this meme that says, I love sleeping, it's like death without the commitment. So care for the body and have daily rituals. So for example, I make coffee every morning. I go to bed looking forward to making coffee in the morning. I got a hand grinder, so I have that physical experience of making the coffee. Find daily rituals that are meaningful for you. If there's a drink that you enjoy or a favorite food, have those on hand. Keep snacks in your car. And if you do something consistently at the same time every day, your body will respond. This is ritual. Repeated actions, usually meaningful. So daily rituals are incredibly powerful. You can take what you already do. Another thing that you can do is a lot of us wear uniforms. I don't in my hospice job, but I do in my other jobs. So as you take off your uniform, as you take off your work clothes, you can say, I am taking off my job. I am removing the responsibilities of this job. You know, like leaving work at work. You can say, like, I am putting down the CNA or nurse position. I am putting on my home self. My kids tease me because as soon as I get home, I dress like this, you know, at work, depending, or clergy clothes. And I get into pajamas as soon as I get home. If I'm going to be home for 5 minutes, I put pajamas on. And I really value, again, being comfortable, being cozy. So take care of yourself in the ways that you can. Gratitude. Start practicing saying, right when you wake every morning, say, I am grateful for. As you go to bed, say, I am grateful for. It will change your life. The neuroscience of gratitude is demonstrated. It is incredibly powerful. Back to this idea of versions of self. I love this idea that every day is new. Every moment is new. You can say, I have not been able to do this up until now. Sometimes I'll say, I don't know of a version of myself that could do this. But maybe, maybe some future version of myself could do a particular thing. I love thinking of versions of myself. In fact, when I was really, really depressed after my second divorce, I imagined myself 6 years in the future. I call them 45. I'm going to celebrate my 45th birthday a lot. That's in 2 years, by the way. I imagined a version of myself who was beyond the struggles of the moment. And so like tomorrow is a new day. Assimilate, put down what was, what is, and say, okay, next time, I can respond to this in a different way. In relationships, for example, it really helped me around heartbreak to shift from I'm feeling so heartbroken, I'm feeling so rejected, to this is how I want to behave when I feel that a relationship has potential. I am going to live my values. And even if someone ghosts me, I can feel peace because of how I responded. So again, find what your value is and use them. Now, sustainable well-being. All of us have busy days. All of us have overwhelming days. But if you are not acting on your values week by week, either they aren't your values or you should do something different. A week is a really good measurement of how is your life going? Are you doing what you want to do? Do you feel good about how your week has gone in general? Again, all of us have good days, hard days, busy days. But if you look back and can say, yeah, that was a good enough week. If you can say that, you're doing great. If you can't, change something. If you are not having good weeks, change something. Work-life integration. Don't think of it as work-life balance, because if you have to balance work and life, what is work? It's not life. No, it's all life. It's all of your life. And so thinking in terms of work-life integration, so I work all the time, and I can be very flexible, but I work all the time. I love my jobs. When I'm not working, I'm working. Like when I'm not being a chaplain in my jobs, I'm calling up my friends and giving them relationship advice, or I am ministering to them. I joke that I make a really good girlfriend. I give my female friends advice all the time. We talk about their dating experience. Male socialization is evil. That's a different topic. And we as men can overcome that and be better. The power of art. My premium Spotify and Amazon Music are some of my favorite subscription services. I make emotional playlists, and there's one playlist on Spotify that's called Life Sucks that I listen to a lot. I play on repeat The Bridge of Khazad-dûm, which is where Gandalf dies from Lord of the Rings. I told you that I'm a nerd. And it is so powerful. And as we listen to music, I love my workout playlist. Use art, movies, TV shows. I binged a season of This Is Us, and that was some really good therapy. So find out what art speaks to you. Books, music, movies, television. And then again, with caring for your body, like get outside, get in the sun, care for your body. And remember acceptance, compassion, and perspective. For example, I mentioned that literally today, I got the news that I didn't even get interviewed for this job that was a really, really, really big deal. It was to literally fix West Point Academy, the military academy. That would have been an amazing opportunity. I didn't get it. I have been working for 10 months toward this job opportunity, along with other things. And again, my head already knows that this is for the best. I have perspective. Keep that perspective. Another example is my 19-year-old son is switching his major from computer science to electrical engineering. He wants to program cyborgs, which is so amazing. He wants to create cyborgs. And he's like, wow, this is going to take a long time. Life is long. Life is the longest thing you'll ever do. Think about that. Life is not short. It's the longest thing you'll ever do. I think that's from The Office. Dwight Schrute says it, I believe. So keep perspective where it's okay, this is hard. This is a hard day, or I'm disappointed. I don't know how it will work out. So as I said, I can see this job that would have been an incredible, incredible opportunity. I also can see how it would be a distraction. And I can see how moving forward with my life as it is now is very powerful and beneficial. So acceptance, compassion, and perspective. So I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. As I said, show up, name, practice telling the truth, feel your feelings, name what you grieve, give yourself permission to be, tell yourself stories about meaning, remind yourself why you are doing what you do, what your values are, what the perspective is. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself in the moment. Take care of yourself in the day. Take care of yourself in the week. Keep that perspective, and you will train and build yourself into a version of yourself who is a superhero of well-being. And with that, farewell.